Adrenaline.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm back for a new video, and this time I have OMAKS and his Techno. So as usual, you can check all the reference tracks that I've used for this one. This time we have Crowd Control, Egyptian, Make Your Transition, and Your Soul. Also, please check the link in the description if you want to get the project file and see all the processing that I've used in this one. To say also thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and commenting. And now let's get into it.
Adrenaline.
Now we're gonna dive into the kick first, as usual. So this is my kick bass group, and this is how it sounds. So I made the kick out of a few layers, of course. I'm gonna show you first the kick punch, and then we're gonna see the bass. So of course I have lots of group processing. I'm gonna start first without it. Let's check the different layers. So for this kick, I have 4 different layers, and as you can see, I really like to use as audio, because that way I can see every elements and see where it hits, if it's more in the bass, in the mids, if it's more at the transient, on the tail, or in the punch. So my main kick is this one, which is the punch. So without the processing, it sounds like this. And what I'd like to do is take a first punch layer, which is more in the bass, and then I'm gonna add up some other kind of elements to add more transient and more punch. So here I really just want the first part of that kick, because in the second part of the kick, especially the tail, I really want a big nasty reverse bass. So I want some space and some dynamic. So that's why I want a short kick here. So I just take the low and mid part. Now I'm gonna add a few transient on top of it. So I have this mid layer, which is taken from a sample. So it's a pretty distorted kick, but it's only punching in the mids. Then I have a layer here, which is more in the high end. So here I want the transient and also like the reverby part. And finally here, just the transient. So just the talk. And all together, sounds like a pretty solid punch kick. I'm gonna then distort it, compress it, and add a tiny layer of reverb. So first I'm adding this EQ. As you can see, I have some resonances, so especially in the mid-range. You can see usually there's some boxiness at 400, 300, 200, and also sometimes at 800. That's what I'm doing here with this EQ. Next, I have an OTT, which is gonna compress the whole thing. Tiny layer of plate reverb, and just a final EQ here to reinforce the punch. I think it was needed afterwards with the group processing. Now I'm gonna show you the bass. So the bass without all of this processing is made out of Serum. I encourage you to see my tutorial on reverse basses to see how it's done. But basically I'm just drawing a note. Here it's F sharp. And then I'm just using this Serum patch. So I started from the bass that I did for Carve a while ago, but I changed a lot of things, especially like the sound source, the different low pass filter, also the way it's shaped, position of the wavetable, and all of this stuff. It's moving constantly and it creates some different textures. I have also some FM synthesis. So you see without it, it's a bit less interesting. It adds a bit of harmonic. You can play also with those different pitches. I have a distortion here, but I could have used this one, for instance. I have a tiny layer of reverb because it feels a bit less dry, but you have to be careful. Put a low cut here. And then I'm just playing around here with the shape of that LFO, with the cutoff here. And once I have something that pleases me, I just want to distort it to give it more character. And then it's just EQ, 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 especially with the group processing to make the whole thing match together with the punch and so that it's well balanced. So it's hard to really explain and recreate it perfectly, but just so you understand. What really makes the character of it is really the distortion here. So you can use the Ableton one, which is the amp, which is magnificent, but you can also use some other ones. So here I'm just using the decapitator, but you see without drive, so it's just for the character, like the grain analog effect. You see here it really adds some high end, then a bit of reverb. Adds also this tiny thing in the background, and then it will be just EQ, but I'm gonna add it maybe just a sidechain to make sure it doesn't clash with the kick. Some other EQs. Also 2 clippers. Especially this one is really like squashing the thing. It's very important because here I want something heavy, almost like the hard music, hard style music. So this one is doing a lot of work, but I have also to balance it in the end to make sure I don't have too much saturation on the whole thing. So together, without the group processing, as you can see, I need more highs to have a better tonal balance. And then it's just gluing all together and adding also some controls on the panning, and you will see how it works. So first one is bass in mono and drum bass. It's gluing and making also some other distortion. Here you can see that I was lacking a lot of high end. The sound was there, but I needed really to balance more the frequencies. Then I used Stage 1, which is very effective and very interesting plugin, especially to balance the depth and width. So here I'm just tweaking with the different parameters to see if I want something more wide in the mid-range, in the high range, in the low range. Really, like usually you want tight low end. You want the transient to be really in the center because that's the punch, the first punch of the kick. And then in the mid-range, you have more latitude to actually put it with more width if you like it. Then I'm just compressing at the end also with the OTT, and then finally just the final tweaks. Clipper. And if I want, I can make it even more wide. It could work. So again, I'm using the Stage 1. Here I've put it everything in mono in the low end, and I put some width also in the mid-range here. It's really huge. So then I just render this to audio. I make just a final kind of EQs, and that's pretty much it for this kick. So to accompany this kick, I have also this texture, which is gonna put a bit of ambience in the background. So here I just found a loop that I liked. Sometimes it's nice to throw in just a loop like this, and I'm just making sure it's not too dry and it fits with the room of my kick and of my track as a whole. Also, usually you have some mud in the mid frequencies, so I like to do those cuts, and I'm also controlling here the wideness with the ozone imager. Next to my kick, I have the drums. So I think OMAKS is using some pretty classic drums, just effective open hats, hi-hats and ride, but nothing too fancy. This is not really like the main elements in this track. It's more like to give some drive, but really like usually you have one big kick with some leads and big elements like screeches or acid or whatever, or vocals. So just to show you the drums here, I'm using this 909 open hat, which is pretty classic, and I'm using this pattern. So what I do is I take the open hat, I'm also using the tail to make some compression, and then I'm using the tail also, like this tail, just forward, and it adds a bit of reverby kind of movement, and it's usually very effective with the kick. Also with the sidechain, of course, is very important. So I'm adding just a bright kind of hull, a very short delay, some EQ, of course, I don't want that mid, you can see. And also I have some huge resonances, especially in the high ends, or 4K and 10K usually. And then I'm just making sure again to compress a little bit, to cut a bit the tail, and sidechain. Very straightforward. Next, I have another kind of hi-hat. This one is more dull, and here I'm also creating a bit of movement with that first quick like reverby end of open hat, and then this straightforward open hat. So together it's kind of a layering that makes it more full, and it's exactly the same processing here, so it ensures that it's coherent. Here I have a drum loop, so I took a drum loop and then I just chop it up until I made my own pattern. So there's an underlying perk underneath and also some hi-hats. So altogether, the three of them like this. And then final hi-hat is this pattern. Again, I'm just using like a closed hi-hat, playing with the transpose to see what fits better. Also, I didn't like this very sharp transient, so I cut it. Then just using the same thing, like plate reverb, sidechain. I like to do for my sidechain like a double sidechain, one that is full to let the kick pass through, and the rest just to cut like the mid frequencies that could maybe interfere with the rest of the track. And also sometimes a sus, especially very effective for the resonances. And finally, I have the ride here, pretty basic pattern also. So playing also with that tail, and then also trying different pitches. This one was more dynamic when it's pitched up, and then just the same processing again. So plate reverb, sidechain, cutting the mid and controlling the resonances, and then that's pretty much it. All together, it's just grouped. Instead of using the return channel to make some reverb, this time I'm using the endless smile to make those reverby tails like this. Then I just have a final drum, which is a clap. What I like to do to make a punchy clap that's very slappy is I use snare drum, like a snare sample, especially to get that punch. And I'm also compressing with those fade outs. And then I have a clap, basic 909 clap that I just clip, control a bit also to make it more clear, and together just make this punchy hat. Of course, I have also some compression here, distortion from the drum bus. It's really gluing and make it more strong. Then I have this plate reverb, like this room. Then compression does it all. And final EQ and clipping. Especially very effective with the hard clipping for the fast transients. It's usually working. And so that's pretty much it for my clap. So next I have all my main elements that I call as leads. So basically I have some stabs, acids, screeches, and other screeches actually. So I'm playing a bit with the patterns, with the different pitches, and I'm also playing with some color enhancers. So as you can hear here, so I have some part of my track where it's all call and answer, and I have some other parts where it's more like straightforward patterns like this with the kick. Every time the kick hits, I have a new note. I have also a melody afterwards for the end of the track, which was more fitting to one of the reference. So now let's show you the different patches. So for this one, really, I'm just scrolling through my bank preset. If I have some inspiration, I can make the sound for myself, but this time I just scroll through some screeches or acid patch until I found something that fits to my track. So this time it's just an acid patch from On Point Sample. And then I take this patch and I'm just trying different filters and trying different cutoff parameters until something fits. And also, of course, there's some processing that really gives life to the patch. Here, there's something moving here in the LFO. So here I'm just using that note and playing with that pattern. You can see that I have humanization on all of those patterns. I have also some randomization in the velocity, which is very important. Otherwise, it will feel too robotic. I'm using the OTT on all of my leads. Basically, it makes everything stronger. I'm using that vintage reverb, big reverb on those leads also because I like it very much. Then it's just EQing to control the resonances. So here, it was really too much in the mid frequencies because I have already the bass. You have also here that resonancy usually in the mid frequencies, so be careful with that. Next, I have a stab. So here I wanted something different and I am applying also exactly the same processing. I just have here that plugin just to control and give more distortion and crispiness. But this time it's another lead sample plugin. It's a lead patch from On Point Sample. So basically it's just kind of saw wave, very distorted, multiband compression, of course. Again, pitch is moving, filter is moving, and this is all making the sound interesting. So here I'm just using another pattern, playing here with those notes, playing also here. Final notes here, which is more used as a background element. Next up, I have an acid sound. This one is from TKNVLT, so it's a basic kind of acid patch. Again, same kind of things moving, just different patterns. Could also make this, makes it even more interesting. And also here. Then it's the same processing here. So I have also double OTT sometimes. I know some artists, they do just put like 6 OTTs. Then I have this screech. Again, it's from some Raveyard sound. But again, like it's just big sounds, lots of saw wave because that's like the most harmonics that you can get. And then it's just putting the whole thing into life with some reverb and delay. Then you can just play around with the automation. So you can see also that in my acid patch, I'm also playing here with the macros, which is basically the filter cutoff and the acid. And the acid is basically the LFO1, which is the wavetable position of the sound. And I'm playing with those two automations each time it plays, so that it makes also more interesting, because otherwise, again, it would feel too robotic. If you keep the same pattern, same note, but you don't change any parameter, it just feels a bit soulless. So you really gotta be careful to make something move constantly. So final screech, again, some different kind of patterns. And then it's just this patch. Then I just use the same screech. But this time I'm making something creative because I'm just like changing the pattern. I'm pitching up 1 octave. And then I'm just also pitching the thing with the pitch bend here. For instance, you can do here. Pitch up. Pitch down, and instantly it gets less boring, because otherwise I would just have played these patterns like 4 times the same. It will feel like lifeless. It's a way to make some movements. And also the final one, which is again the same pattern, but I'm using it in a new way also. So this time I pitch it down like 2 octaves compared to this one, and 1 octave compared to this one. And I'm also playing with the pitch bend here. but like with a long bar. And I'm also don't do this, like it will be too simple. It's not as interesting as this. I could also have gone crazy like this. It would have worked also. And here again, same processing. And I just withdraw the filter here. I can add another filter like a flanger or a comp filter. It would have been also interesting. So really experiment with that to create new sounds. You don't have to create everything on your own because artists don't do that. They use patches. So it's fine to use patch, but then just make it your own with your own tweaks and parameters that keep moving, not to feel like it's the same sound that you can hear on other tracks. That's pretty much it for my leads. So now I'm going to show you the vocal. So this one is a vocal from Raveyard sound. Again, again, playing different kind of patterns. So here it's the full sample, here it's some chopped up, here different variation, like only 2 samples, chopped up samples, here 4 or 5, whatever. Here it's like the end of the phrase. Here it's like a combination of both. So again, make the thing really move, make it more dynamic. And again, I'm just adding lots of reverb, saturation, and delay to make it more. Here you can see it's a bit dry. Here it's directly more crispy, more wide, and more lively because of those different effects. I just have another vocal here just for the drop. Adrenaline. And it's exactly the same processing. I'm also making sure I have my sidechain at the right time. So here my vocal, there's no sidechain because it's the break. And then I'm using the kickstart adrenaline that activates other drops so that it doesn't clash with the kick. That's here. So next I have my melody. So this one is very inspired from one of the tracks that I use as a reference. And it was also kind of way to show you the different things that OMAKS can do. So here it was more melodic. And what I did is I use again just a patch. It's an init patch from Serum. So it's this one, the Phantom plug. And then I'm just again tweaking. I think it was a low pass 18. I switched to 24. I switch also the envelope. I kind of change also here the compression, withdrawing a few effects, and then I'm adding my effects here because I like better this reverb, and I can also use this OTT, which I prefer instead of the one from Serum. I'm adding also some distortion. You can see it really brings it forward. It's like very effective. I also have it on a group because here I'm layering, so it makes everything more tight, just having like this OTT on the group. And here I have more like a high-end melody plug, and this one is more in the low end. And there's like an extensive chain here, but basically what's important is I really EQ heavily to get only like the lower sounds. I'm also cutting some of the harmonics, and especially like the ones here in the mid-range, just below 1K. And just together it works better because without it, it feels a bit dry. And here I have more reverb and more delay. But it works because it's only on the lower frequencies, and this one is hitting like forward, like really the plucky sound is made of this, and this one is more like a background layer. So yeah, really important to layer. And here I'm just introducing that melody. So here I'm using the F-sharp Phrygian scale of my track. I just cut it to introduce it, like not the full melody, because it keeps something interesting. Like there's a part of that melody, part of the melody, and then there's the full melody. And it really works with the break. And I'm also accompanying this with a bass sound, which is basically just the root notes here with the melody. Dun, dun, dun. It has a little something, because without it, I felt it was something missing. I think he does that also in his tracks. And here just the vocal drop and then boom. Like you had something that was really full here in the track, because lots of drums, lots of lead sounds. And then you go back to something very straightforward, only the kick and only the melody. And there's this like contrast that really works well. And that's why this drop is working. Then in terms of effects, I mean, it's the usual stuff. So I show you like the saturation, the OTT, the reverb, the delay. It's pretty much the same thing. And then it's controlling the mixing with some EQs and with the SUS too. And yeah, that's pretty much it for these layers. And I just have some final effects. So just a few pre-drop fills that were fitting to the track here. So for my transitions here, also here. Here, I'm just using a sweep, a few impacts also for my intro. Another sweep up here. And you can see that on all of them, I'm making sure also to cut the mud and to add the kickstart when the kick is actually starting so that it doesn't clash. And I just have here a final snare fill for this breakdown and this fill. So not too much, but just the right amount in my breaks, as you can see. And then I just can play with my other elements to fill up the track. So I guess that's it, guys, for this video. Thank you guys so much. I see you in the next one. Ciao.